All right, we're recording, so we're going to go ahead and start, you guys. So welcome everybody for our broker update. I had some requests for some updates. I hope everyone got the agenda, but it's pretty flexible today. We had Austin come, who graciously agreed to visit us today and help answer some questions. And hopefully I can get this uploaded for those that cannot make it today to a new YouTube channel for you guys to watch it later. That's my hope. And to our new website. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Austin to take over. So Austin, the floor is yours.
Are you going to be able to throw the form up on the screen?
If you're ready for it now, yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with a disclaimer based on today. This webinar was recorded on July 15th, 2020, and all guidance was provided based on the latest version of SCR Form 310, and that was in effect at the time. The information provided in this meeting was meant as general information. If you have any specific questions or questions on updated versions of SCR Form 310, call the SCR Legal Hotline at 803-772-5206. Okay. So
done, Austin. Nice.
Yeah. Want to make sure I read it exactly correct. So we can get a lot of questions about repairs, especially sort of in the market we're having. There's a lot more debate of what exactly is included in each repair section, kind of dispelling some of the myths of, hey, one of these, there's common belief that some of these are more buyer friendly than others, some more seller friendly. So kind of want to just go through what's included in each one of these, what's not included, and then see if y'all have any questions throughout. So we're going to go to paragraph 8 of the contract, which should be at page 3. So this is one of the biggest areas of change we made in 2020. So now they're going to be, all 3 repair options are actually going to be built into the contract. So as opposed to prior to this, when you would have the repair procedure built into the contract, due diligence was a separate addendum, and then 391 had a as-is clause at the very bottom of it. The forms committee decided to add all of them to one form, all to the contract. That way you're not having to worry about having loose forms around. So the due diligence addendum has to come from our forms library. So if you have any of those still left over at your office, shred them, get rid of them. There's no need for it. The due diligence language is now in the contract, and in fact, there's going to be some outdated terms in that addendum, so it won't even make sense to use it with our contract. So I would encourage you to not use those. And if you get a contract that has one attached to it, just say, hey, by the way, SCR updated the contract in 2020. That due diligence language should be in the contract. So the important thing is going to be when you meet with your client to say, hey, this is a part of the contract where you actually got to make a choice. There are 3 different paths we can go down, but we need to pick only one of the 3 paths. If you choose not to check any of these boxes, you're going to default as is, which we'll describe a little later why that's not necessarily a good thing. If you decide, if you have a buyer or a seller who goes, man, I like everything in all of these 3 options, I want to check all 3. It doesn't work that way. I kind of describe this as a buffet. The first thing you grab at the buffet line is what you're having for dinner. So if you check repair procedure and due diligence, you're going to be stuck with repair procedure. So the easiest way to think of repair procedure is this is going to get you, the buyer's going to get a house that works. They're going to get a house when they move in that the main systems are operable and the roof is not leaking and there's no major environmental or structural concerns. Anything that's not sort of a major move-in ready issue, they're probably not going to get fixed unless the seller decides to fix it on their own or the parties agree to do it separately. So, and the kind of way I look at this paragraph is repair procedure is this first paragraph is really the buyer's options and the buyer's requirements. And then the second paragraph is the seller's requirements and what the seller should be following. So in this first paragraph, the buyer is going to, by a certain date, 6 p.m. on a certain date, they're going to complete all their inspections and they're going to deliver those requests to the seller. If they fail to meet that deadline, they will have waived their right to inspections under this paragraph or under repairs under this section. So make sure that you're meeting that deadline. Make sure if you're negotiating back and forth that those dates still make sense. So I mentioned the systems. So the 6 systems that need to be, that you can ask to be put in operative condition: heating, air conditioning, electrical, plumbing, water supply, and wastewater. The way I kind of describe operable is the obvious one is if you flip the light switch and all the lights come on, the electrical's working. If you turn on the AC and cold air comes out, heat and hot air comes out. If you kind of get into anything more of, hey, it's not blowing out as cold as I would like it to, it's not, there's not as much heat, the water pressure's, not ideal, then that's really going to be a negotiation between the parties. The important one in there, the one that's most misunderstood, is the roof is free of leaks. It does not talk about the useful life of the roof. It does not talk about the age of the roof. It does not matter whether the inspector recommends that you get a new roof. It does not matter whether the lender tells you need a new roof. The roof just has to be free of leaks. If the lender tells you need a new roof, then one of four things is going to happen. The seller is going to buy the buyer the roof they never bought for themselves. The buyer can buy the roof completely themselves. The two parties can come to an agreement on the price of the roof, or the fourth option is no one pays for a roof, and then financing probably falls through and you get kicked out of the contract due to the financing contingency. But in none of the three options below, repair procedure, due diligence, or as is the seller going to be obligated to buy you a new roof. There is no option to obligate the seller to buy a roof. Okay, so you're going to deliver all that to the seller by that certain date. If you want to do any additional inspections, then you can do those at your expense as a buyer. This last sentence in this first paragraph was something that was added in 2020. And this was really added to kind of encourage mediation, encourage discussion. Like I mentioned, the HVAC system is not running to the buyer standards. It's turning on, but it's not great. So the buyer says, hey, you need to fix the HVAC system. The seller goes, well, the HVAC system is working. I'm living in this house in South Carolina in July. Trust me, I would know if it's not working. But go ahead and send me the relevant portions of your inspection regarding the HVAC system so I can take a look. If the buyer responds with, hey, I paid good money for that inspection report, you have no right to it, then the seller can say, hey, per the last sentence in paragraph and this repair procedure here, I'm going to ask for the entire inspection report. Do not make a common practice of doing that as a listing agent, because once your seller client receives this report, they're obligated to know everything that is in that, and it may change some of their disclosure answers. So try to get the relevant portions, but if you need it, it's there. This language only exists in repair procedure. This option does not exist in as is or in due diligence. So this is strictly an option under repair procedure. And like I said, it was really to try to negotiate those differences there. I guess I see I have a question. So a question about how roof where the insurance would not insure. It'd be sort of the same. It'd be the exact same issue. So essentially, hey, roof is not working. Parties are going to have to agree. Hey, seller buys the roof, the buyer buys the roof. Parties come to a terms, or hey, we're not able to get it to work out. But if that case, the buyer may have to buy the roof. The seller's obligation is to give you a roof that's free of leaks. As far as the useful age or life of the roof, that's not an obligation of the seller. So no later than 6 p.m. on a hard date, the seller is going to tell you whether or not they agree to make repairs. Those are going to be those seller pay repairs. So that's going to be making the 6 systems operable, roof-free leaks, and address environmental concerns, structural concerns. If the seller agrees to do all that, then we will move forward to closing. If the seller does not agree to do those, or they don't timely reply, then we're going to move forward to the third paragraph. This part here in bold was added in 2020 to give some more clarification. This had always been the case. These had never been seller paid repairs, but we kind of wanted to give more clarification. So especially if you're meeting with a buyer and they go, hey, home maintenance, there's some maintenance issues I really care about, or hey, I can't stand the carpet and downstairs, they're going to need to fix that, then say, hey, we're going to have one of two options. We can either ask for the carpet to be replaced in a separate addendum, or if that really is a deal breaker for you, then let's do due diligence. They don't fix the carpet under due diligence, so we can walk away. But don't assume that because you want it, it's going to be done under repair procedure, because if it's not one of the 6 systems, roof, environmental, structural concerns, it's not going to be done. So let's assume that the buyer asks you to make the HVAC system operable, fix a leak in the roof, paint the bathroom, and put new carpeting downstairs. If the seller says, hey, I'll fix the HVAC system and fix the leaky roof, then we're moving on to closing. If the seller doesn't respond at all, or if the seller does anything other than agreeing to those 2 terms, if they can agree to do the carpet, they can agree to do paint the bathroom if they would like, but there's no obligation for them to do so. Agreeing to do that does not take away their obligation to do the other 2, the HVAC system or the roof. So if the seller does not agree to do the seller paid repairs, then the buyer within 2 calendar days can accept the property in its present condition, make sure they talk to the lender before doing that, negotiate it for a new contract, talk about, hey, I understand the HVAC system's expensive, let's split the cost of that, or the buyer terminates by delivering notice. I'll make this point here. There's none of the 3 options in repair procedure gives you any better advantage on earnest money. The earnest money calculation is the exact same on all 3. It is mutual agreement of the parties or a court order. So if you do not have a signed release agreement, Form 518, signed by both parties, or a judicial order telling you to do with that, what to do with the escrow money, leave it in the account. Do not touch it. Do not carve off of it. Leave it alone. It needs to sit in the account and grow old. It does not matter what the buyer, how ridiculous the requests are from the buyer. It does not matter how little the seller agrees to do. It doesn't matter if the buyer or seller skips town. There is no automatic right to earnest money, period, in the state of South Carolina. So if a buyer or seller ever asks you, hey, I'm going to get my earnest money back, the answer is mutual agreement of the party or court order. I'm going to need 1 of 2 sheets of paper to do it. I would go ahead and add into your package when you start meeting with clients and you're already having them sign the disclosure of brokerage relationships and other forms, to throw in there the earnest money disclosure, Form 620. And that's going to explain to them that, hey, earnest money in the state of South Carolina is a negotiation. We're going to need to have mutual agreement of the parties or a court order. There's no sort of contractual language, no sort of addendum we can have that will allow that. And unless you're having a law firm hold the funds, if you're having the law firm hold the funds, then make sure you have an escrow agreement between the law firm and the parties, and that will be what dictates. But if it is in your brokerage account, you're going to need 1 of those 2 sheets of paper. Any questions on repair procedure before we move on to due diligence?
Austin, this was a question that came up about the 2 calendar days. You got to choose one of these, and number 2 being negotiate a new amended contract with the seller for the payment of these repairs or the price. So
Yes,
any negotiation between the buyer and the seller has to be completed in those 2 calendar days. If they're still negotiating, but those 2 days pass, then the buyer loses their right, correct?
So, and that is 2 calendar days from the date, this date in the second paragraph.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, honestly, the parties could continue to negotiate, but at that point, the seller would be able to refer to the contract and say, hey, within this 2 calendar day, we're past the 2 calendar day window, you have an as-is contract. Could the parties still agree afterwards to agree to something? Sure, but the buyer essentially the seller would be within their rights to say, hey, buyer, the deadline has passed.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure on that. Thank you.
So the question of if the earnest money is held by an attorney and there isn't an agreement, am I correct that the attorney can go ahead and release? That's going to be kind of a call for the attorney to make. Our recommendation from you guys would be to have an agreement signed between the law firm, the buyer, and the seller. Have that in your file as well. That way, if LLR knocks on your door and says, hey, I see there was $1,000 for earnest money for this transaction on 123 Main Street, where is it? You can go, hey, it was with Austin's law firm. Here's an agreement. Because essentially, if you don't have an agreement and you dump the money with the law firm is obviously going to be subject to their own ethics rules and things of that sort, but you don't really know the rules of the game on that. And that earnest money disclosure form is Form 620. SCR does not have a standard escrow agreement. That is going to be something that a law firm is going to be able to draft themselves. I've never seen one that requires a staple. They're usually pretty simple documents. Hey, law firm is holding $1,000 of earnest money between buyer and seller and will release under the following terms. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to due diligence. So this is almost the exact same language that was in your due diligence addendum with one exception. We changed it from your due diligence period being a number of business days to now having a hard date deadline of 6 p.m. Reminder, this is not the deadline for you to do all your inspections. This is the all-in deadline. So as prior repair procedure, we had 3 different dates you needed to know. You need to know the buyer's date, the seller's date, and then that 2 calendar days. This is an all-in date. So if we were to put August 1st in here, August 1st as the buyer, you would need to do any and all inspections that you would like, deliver your repair request to the seller, give the seller adequate time to get their own, contractors get out there, give them estimates, etc., and then have time to negotiate with the seller. Because by 6 p.m. on August 1st, we need to have done one of four things. We need to have agreed on repairs. We need to have agreed to an extension. We need to have, as the buyer, need to have terminated the contract and delivered you a notice of termination, or understand that it's at 1 tick past 6 p.m. on August 1st, I'm going to be in an as-is contract in regards to repairs. My right to request repairs at that point is going to be over. So make sure that you're doing, giving yourself plenty of time, that you're sitting down with the buyer. I always kind of say, hey, if we're going to do a 10-day due diligence period, as the buyer, I'm going to go, hey, we're going to take the first 5 days to do any of our inspections. We're going to deliver all those requests to the seller at one time, because there is language in Form 525 that states essentially the first time both parties sign a 525, that ends your due diligence period. So if I was to send Billy today and offer a repair request and say, hey, can you paint the bathroom? And she signs that, and even though we had a due diligence period that ends on August 1st, we would be done today. I would have forfeited the remaining time of my due diligence period. So make sure that you aren't sending them one at a time, that you're sending all your requests at once. But make sure you're also not, I'm not sending Billy 20 requests, July 31st, because that's not fair, or there's no chance that she's going to actually respond at that point. So I would take the first 5 days, I would do the response, I would do all my inspections. I would then send a repair request with, the 4, 5, 6, 8 items that I want, and say, hey, this offer is going to expire, this repair request is going to expire on day 8. That way, based on how, if Billy immediately responds and says, hey, all 8 of those items seem reasonable, then fine, our due diligence period is over, and I should be happy with that because I got everything I wanted. If she responds back to me and says, hey, I won't do all 8, but I'll do the first 4, then I go back to my buyer and say, hey, they're not willing to do the other 4. What do you want to do? Do you want to try to counter back with maybe only 6 items? Do you want to say, hey, no, it's all 8 or nothing? Or do you just want to say, hey, I wanted all 8. They're not willing to play ball. Let's terminate. And you want to give yourself that 2-day window so you can kind of figure out what you want to do, whether you need to, or hey, let's ask for another week, Billy. So we want to have some more time to discuss this. Because like I said, at 6 o'clock on that date, if you have not if you have not agreed to terms, agreed to an extension, or done notice of termination with a notice of termination, Form 313, and a termination fee, you have not validly terminated the contract at 1 tick past 6 o'clock. We're in an as-is contract in regards to repairs. I also recommend that if you are terminating the contract under due diligence, that you go ahead and attach a release document with it, Form 518. That way you can handle the earnest money at one point. For no other reason, the seller's going to have received a direct check from the buyer. So at that point, maybe they're a little bit more likely to negotiate on the earnest money because they have money already in their hand. So you will have terminated the contract by attaching the termination fee and Form 313, but you'll still have this earnest money issue. But if you can get them to sign the release agreement at the same time, then you are completely done with the deal. Earnest money has been, can be dispersed. Everyone can put the house immediately back on the market as active. No further issues there. The only other thing I'll bring up under due diligence is this is a time that the buyer can do any and all inspections that they would like. One of the more common ones I bring up, especially if you have buyers or sellers or buyers who are from an area of the country where termites are not as prevalent, that's not a terrible time for them to do maybe a termite inspection. Your CL 100 is obviously only valid 30 days out from closing, but this would allow them to kind of get a first look. It's also under the CL 100 contingency, if the seller agrees to fix the repair, or fix the repair or the termite issue, then the buyer has no recourse to walk away. If you were to find termites during the due diligence period, you could say, hey, I don't care if the seller's going to fix them. I don't want to live in a house that has termites, and you would be able to terminate at that point. Understanding that would not necessarily meet your CL 100 deadline, but it would sort of give your buyer a first look there. So any questions on, I want to bring up on the termination fee. That is a separate fund, set of money from earnest money. Again, earnest money, put in your account, not touched again until you have a mutual agreement of the parties or a court order. So do not take the termination fee out of the earnest money. That is a separate check written directly from the buyer to the seller. That is not to be siphoned off of earnest money, zeroed out from earnest money. The earnest money is completely left alone. This is a completely separate pot of money. I get asked all the time, but what my buyer doesn't think that they should have to pay the termination fee. What happens if we don't pay the termination fee? If you just send the notice of termination and not the but do not attach a termination fee, you have not validly terminated the contract under due diligence. And at one tick past 6 o'clock, you're going to be stuck with an as-is contract. So make sure that your buyer is aware. It does not matter why you were terminating under due diligence. The termination fee is owed the exact same, whether it's because you're terminating because you found one ant in the house or because the HVAC system is completely broken. It does not matter.
Austin, please.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Due diligence termination, again, I understand that they can really, if they have this check, they can really, terminate for any reason or no reason, as long as they pay for that. But if another contingency is not satisfied, and therefore, we're not going to go through with this, they do not have to pay that due diligence fee, correct?
Correct. So there are three contingencies that are intentionally separate from any of the repair options. And those are financing, appraisal, and CO 100. Now, generally, due to the truncated time that you do a due diligence period, you don't tend to have much overlap. But if for some reason your buyer is not terminating because of any due diligence repairs, but they're going to have to terminate because they've got their financing denied, the seller refuses to fix a CO 100 issue, or the seller refuses to lower under appraisal, then you would actually be terminating under one of those contingencies and not due diligence, and a termination fee would not be owed. But I'm based on my experience on the hotline, there's very little. It's not very often that those timelines overlap. They were but they are intentionally separate paragraphs. So if you are terminating under financing, appraisal, or CO 100, that is not going to require a termination fee because you are leaving under a separate provision.
Okay. Well, I actually had an agent, listing agent call me and say, your agent had a buyer that terminated under, because the house didn't appraise, and we want the due diligence money. And I said, well, a contingency of the contract totally separate from due diligence was not satisfied. That was their out.
Yeah, so you would want to make sure as the agent or the broker that you're making it abundantly clear that we are terminating per financing, appraisal, termites, and that's why. And then, of course, that due diligence fee is only owed if you're terminating because of your due diligence rights during the due diligence period. That is not a fee that goes out to, it's only for the length of the due diligence period. But if you are terminating because of because you weren't able to obtain financing, because the seller refused to lower the price due to an appraisal, or because of CO 100, then you are not obligated to pay that termination fee.
Okay, thank you, honey.
Yeah, so I want to make clear. So under CO 100, house is found to have termites in it. If the seller says, no problem, I'll fix it, the buyer does not have a right to walk away under CO 100. The right for a CO 100 buyer to terminate under CO 100 is only if the house is discovered to have termites in it and the seller goes, I lived with them, so can you. If the seller agrees to fix termites, then the buyer does not have a right to walk away under CO 100. So the due diligence fee is owed if you terminate during the due diligence period, and that is owed prior to that deadline to terminate. So if you are going to terminate under due diligence, that fee is if Billy is the listing agent and as my buyers decide that we're going to terminate, I would need to deliver to Billy a notice of termination, Form 313, and a termination fee. And I would also personally attach a release agreement to it saying, hey, and the $1,000 of earnest money returned to my buyer. Hopefully that, Billy's clients will see the check that my buyers gave them and say, hey, let's just go ahead and end this out. What should happen with the money, the check? You obviously would hold that as a brokerage firm. Depending on where your client is located, you may get that money up front and escrow it, or it may just be, hey, we met with our clients today. They decided to terminate. They gave me the check, and as soon as I got the check, I brought it right directly to Billy's office. Make sure that you're in your office having some sort of safety, protocol procedures for if you're taking that money into account. But the ideal thing would be as soon as you get that money, that it would be kind of given. And that is only, like I said, this fee is only to be paid if you are terminating. This is not an upfront fee. This is a termination fee. This is only a fee if you are terminated under due diligence. If you agree to terms Or if you agree to do as is, the termination fee is not owed. It is only owed if you terminate during due diligence.
But as long as you get the notice to them by that 6 p.m. deadline, you can get that due diligence fee to them at a later point.
No, ma'am.
correct? No.
It's got to all be there by 6 o'clock.
Okay, that's what I wanted to find out.
So that's the other reason for giving that that window at the end based on how they respond. So what you don't want to have is, hey, we find out at 4:30 that, hey, we want to terminate, and now we've got to try to find my buyer on an hour and a half's notice to get a check from them and then drive it across town and get it delivered. So make sure that you have sort of built in a time with your buyer of, hey, we need to make sure that we have some plans in place of if we're going to terminate, we kind of know when, and we have a process for when we're going to meet up, how we're going to get a check to the seller, et cetera. Make sure that you're not kind of waiting things out to the last moment. Okay, any other questions on due diligence?
Austin, can I ask a question back to the CL 100?
Mm-hmm.
So if the buyer discovers that there are termites, can a seller spot treat, or do they have to treat the entire house? And then the second part of that is, does the seller have to provide a new CL 100 report?
On that, let me review the section. I know they have to essentially mediate it. I will find that answer and reach out to you personally.
Okay, because Clemson has told me that once a house is listed for sale, they can't spot treat. They have to do a full house treatment.
Okay, yeah, I will check on that and reach out to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to get to as is. So this is the option that you are stuck with if you refuse to check any of the previous boxes.
Yeah.
In my mind, you should almost imagine that there's an imaginary parentheses next to as is, which states cash buyer. Because if you check this option and you do lending, you're going to be spending a lot of time on the phone with the lender. It's going to be an issue. The thoughts behind the committee adding this were really for someone who is going to buy a house and flip it, going to take it down the studs, or wants the land, going to demo it. This is not sort of envisioned for the person who wants to move in tomorrow and host a birthday party for their kids that weekend. So under as is, Bill, can we scroll down just a little bit? Thank you. So
How far are you moving down, Austin?
a little more.
There it is. Sorry.
Yeah. So under as is, it means pretty much what you see is what you get. The buyer is going to buy the house for the purchase price. The seller is going to maintain it subject to normal wear and tear through closing. We do give the buyer the right to inspect the property by 6 p.m. For informational purposes only. So, hey, I'm going to take the house down to the studs. I'm going to do some major renovations, but I need to kind of figure out what kind of shape the house is in so I can kind of structure my repairs, structure my contractors. Let me make sure the floor is structurally sound before I go put in brand new granite countertops or something to that effect. But there's nothing I can find during these inspections that will obligate the seller to fix them or will allow me to terminate. So I walk into this house and it is in horrible shape. It needs tens of thousands of dollars of repairs, and I take that to the seller and go, hey, your house needs a lot of work, and they go, that's why I'm selling it as is. And your buyer cannot walk away. If your buyer wants to try to terminate, and they're under due diligence and under as is, they need to talk to their attorney and be aware of what legal risk and liabilities would be associated with that. So what I honestly recommend is, unless it's in the situation where as is really appropriate, just do due diligence. So under as is, the seller's not obligated to fix anything. Under due diligence, the seller's default position is, I'm not fixing anything that I don't negotiate to fix. So you might as well let the buyer take a look around, figure out, hey, because maybe the buyer has in mind that, I think this is only going to be $1,000 worth of repairs. If they end up finding out that, hey, this is going to be $10,000 repairs, maybe the buyer's going to want to walk away. If a buyer doesn't want to buy a house, they're going to find a way out of the contract one way or the other. At least with the due diligence, they will have found that out sooner. You'll have gotten rid of them. They will be able to move forward. Again, it's not going to obligate the seller to fix anything, and the seller, you may get a termination fee out of it. So I kind of recommend Due diligence as opposed to as is. As is should really be for that very specific deal where really the parties genuinely do not care what shape the house is in. Just because a house is listed on the MLS as is, or a seller tells you to list it as is, does not mean that the only contracts that can be submitted on that house are as is contracts. Because depending on the terms, maybe I list the house as it, or as for $100,000, and we do as is. If someone submits an offer to me for $130,000, but puts due diligence, maybe my seller would be going, hey, that extra $30,000 is worth whatever they may ask for in due diligence or repair procedure. So you as a seller, as a listing agent, obviously have an obligation to give any offer that is submitted on your property, on the property directly to the seller, regardless of what options is checked. And then just realize as a buyer's agent that just because they say list as is in the MLS does not mean that your buyer can't make an offer, try to make a competitive offer using one of the other two repair options. So I'll kind of go over quickly some of the pros and cons of each, and understanding that, hey, the biggest thing I want to kind of make clear is that there's no, there's not one of these that is a one size fits all. There's not a situation where you go, hey, due diligence is always the best option, or repair procedure is always the best option. It's going to really depend on what the individual transaction is, what the needs of your clients are, etc. So I did want to point out, especially, so I mentioned that the financing, appraisal, and CL 100 contingencies are separate from repair procedure. So you can have an as-is contract that is still contingent on a clean CL 100. Because I could say, hey, I don't really care what the shape the house is in because I'm going to take it down to the studs, but I would like termites not to be greeting me when I get to the studs. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it an as-is contract, but it's going to be contingent on a clean CL 100. And that is completely acceptable because that is a separate contingency. Okay, so under repair procedure, some of the pros on the buyer side would be, hey, the seller is going to have to give me a house that works. If they don't give me a house that works, then I'm going to be able to terminate, without having to pay a termination fee. The pros on the seller side are, instead of having to worry about due diligence where the buyer can ask me for anything under the sun, I've really got to make sure that I'm focused on making the 6 systems operable, roof-free leaks, and address environmental structural concerns. It kind of it shrinks down the number of things I have to worry about. The cons on the buyer side would be, I'm really limited to those 9 items. If I really care about carpeting or painting or energy efficiency or fogged windows, things of that sort, the seller's not going to be obligated to fix any of those under repair procedure. The downside on the seller, for the seller on repair procedure is, hey, if I don't fix one of these items, the buyer can walk away and I don't get any sort of termination fee over it. Also, a downside for both parties is we may get into some really nuanced discussions of what is operable, what is structural. And another downside is, obviously, compared to the other two, there's multiple dates we have to remember, and that option can tend to run a little bit longer than others. So a disinterested buyer or seller, it may take longer for you to realize they're disinterested and to get them out of the deal. Most of the data that we have shows that really the same percentage of people drop out under due diligence and repair procedure. A buyer who doesn't want to buy a house, a seller who doesn't want to sell a house is not going to buy or sell it. They'll find a way out. It doesn't matter which one of the options. The advantage of due diligence over repair procedure is you figure out a disinterested buyer much sooner and kind of get them out. So the pros on the buyer side for due diligence are, I can ask for anything I would like. I can ask for a brand new putting green to be put in the backyard, marble floors throughout the entire house, 24 karat gold bathroom fixtures. But the pro on the seller side is, I'm not obligated to fix anything I don't want to fix that I don't negotiate to fix. The downside on the buyer side is the seller is not obligated to fix anything. I can ask for 30 pages worth of repairs and the seller doesn't even have to respond. The downside on the seller is the buyer can wake up one morning and go, you know what, I actually don't want to live in South Carolina, and be gone like that. It doesn't matter what I'm willing to fix, not willing to fix. If the buyer decides, if the buyer sends me 30 things to fix, I fix 29 of them, the buyer can walk away because they didn't get all 30. So that's sort of the pros and cons there. Obviously, under due diligence, it was really kind of intended to be a balancing act. So we allowed the buyer the right to walk away for any and all purposes at any time during the due diligence period. But the counterbalance to that is they'll have to pay a termination fee for doing it. So that's the way that because I hear sometimes, hey, this is super seller friendly or this is super buyer friendly. It's really meant to kind of be a balance there. with the termination fee balancing out the fact that the individual has the right to walk away at any time during the due diligence period. So just keeping that in mind. Obviously, that termination fee can be used as a negotiation tool, especially in a multiple offer situation. Hey, this is how, I can show you how interested I am in the property. I'm willing to put more up as a termination fee. Termination fee could, if we don't give a recommendation at the association, because the termination fee can vary based on the price of the property, the length of time you want due diligence, how competitive the property is. If the property's got 5 offers on it, that may be a different termination fee than if it's a property that's been on the market a year and no one's gone to look at it. If we're wanting a 30-day due diligence period, that's probably going to require a higher termination fee than if we want a 5-day due diligence period. So that's really, the termination fee is whatever both parties feel adequately balances out that scale. As is, the pros, I guess the pro would be, you're really not having to worry about anything. What you see is what you get. The downside is, what you see is what you get. There's no, from the buyer side, it doesn't, if you find something in the house that really makes you unhappy, you're not going to be able to terminate the contract without potentially incurring some legal liability. The downside from the seller is that, if you want to enforce under as is, that may reduce the number of clients that are interested in your property, because it really kind of boxes them in. Like I said, unless it's a very specific situation, or I kind of say you can get 99% of what you want through as is by using due diligence. So as is should really be reserved for those very specific cases where, hey, I'm buying the house and I'm planning, I just really want the land. I'm going to demo the house, 5 days after closing. So I don't care what state the house is in. That would be an appropriate use of as is. But, certainly if someone says, hey, we're planning on moving in, we're planning on having, a party in a month or something to that effect, then, hey, as is, let's do due diligence instead. Have you peace of mind. If you don't want to do any repairs, you don't have to request any under due diligence, but at least you kind of have had your chance to look around and make your peace. Is there any questions on repairs? Anything that I didn't hit, or anything that I made more confusing than I should have?
Austin, if you sell a house as is, this actually just came up, and there was so much garbage in that house. And, in the contract, they are supposed to remove their personal property, which all that garbage was. And the seller said, no, I sold it to you as is. It is as is. So really.
Yeah. So as is regards to property and repairs, you are correct. In paragraph 4, there is verbiage that states that the seller is going to convey possession of a vacant and reasonably clean home free of debris. So just because it's as is doesn't mean that you can't, that you don't have to move out. As is means don't talk to me about repairs.
Right. Okay.
So I'll always make notes that as is under repairs in the contract. So this is only, these 3 options only apply to repairs, which is why, like I said, the financing contingency is separate, appraisal contingency is separate, CO100 is separate. The requirements under paragraph 3 and paragraph 4 are separate. As is just pertains to repairs.
I have a follow-up question to that. This is Jerry Ann. So to that point, should an addendum be created, or what's the protocol if you know that there is a absentee seller, that there's stuff or junk in the house, or if the seller is around and you know that they're not concerned with items? How should you address that to make sure that the items are cleaned out prior to closing?
And which side of the transaction are you on?
And you're on the buyer side. So your buyer is purchasing a property that's as is, and the seller, there's junk in the house, and the seller is not. You want to make sure that the buyer doesn't go there and there's stuff in the house.
If that's a concern, just, hey, shooting an email to the agents, just saying, hey, just making sure that your seller plans on following through on their obligation in paragraph 4 to give us a reasonably clean house free of debris. If there's any sort of issue or pushback on that, get the closing attorney involved. Let the closing attorney, reach out to them and say, hey, you realize this is a requirement under your contract. Or if you don't feel like you can have that agent-to-agent conversation, maybe that's when you get the broker-to-broker conversation, and just say, hey, by the way, we're not saying the house has to be spotless, but let's let's make sure that you didn't just leave 90% of your stuff in the house.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so when terminating under due diligence, a reminder, that check is created directly to the seller. That is a check from the buyer to the seller. And should be a completely separate pot of money from earnest money. If you remember nothing else from today, remember that earnest money should not be touched, bothered with whatsoever, unless you've got one of those 2 sheets of paper.
So Austin, on that due diligence check, does it have to be a cashier's check? Because what if this buyer puts a stop to that check?
I have not had that come up on the hotline. At that point, you've got lots of other issues, and at that point, attorneys are going to get involved. But that has not come up.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and knock on wood that's now that I said that, I'll probably get 3 of those today. Okay. So if there's nothing more on this, I don't want to take any more of your time, but I did want to give a brief professional standards update from the association. We had a meeting on Monday that was led by our general counsel, Byron King, and by Todd Beckstrom, who is a member from Columbia who serves on the National Association's Professional Standards Committee and is the South Carolina representative on it. Was updating us that due to recent events and a renewed focus on racial disparities, that the Professional Standards Committee is looking at sort of beefing up the language in Article 10 regarding fair housing discrimination, and potentially looking at including that into any sort of social media posts or things where you are representing yourself as a member of the association, and your comments and actions on the social media would be potentially painting the association in a bad light, or the industry in a bad light. So this is still in the introductory stages, but I did want to give you guys some notice. Best recommendation is to be thoughtful, use best judgment when posting things on social media, and then obviously understanding that fair housing is a serious issue. If the human decency portion doesn't move you, then reminder that take a look at the Newsday investigation that was published last year in Long Island. Kind of watch some of those videos, see the effect that has, and a reminder that is a violation of the Code of Ethics. And actually, that is one of the violations of the Code of Ethics, that if you're found to be in violation, the board of director or the executive committee has the option to essentially turn over our file to the relevant authorities. So don't engage in any of that yourself. Do not have any patience for clients who want to engage in any sort of fair housing one way or the other. If they are ever saying, hey, I don't want to play by the rules, then just say, hey, here's my listing agreement. We're ending it. Please don't call me. Change your attitude. This is not something that I want to be associated with at all. I have a zero tolerance policy for any sort of racial housing discrimination. And a reminder that your Code of Ethics, Article 10, is actually stronger than federal law. You also have the obligation to not participate or in any discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. So just make sure that you're treating everyone fairly, treating everyone the way that you would like to be treated, that you're not allowing any clients to participate in this, and you're certainly not actively engaging in that in your own business as a listing agent, buyer's agent, or in your brokerage firm. And that is it for me. Unless anyone has any questions, I don't want to take up y'all's entire meeting.
Austin, I had a question for you on one other thing. Nick had mentioned it, I want to say last week in our AE meeting, regarding unemployment claims that had came in. Because it's a new quarter, and just correct me if I'm wrong, if they have any agents that are filing unemployment in South Carolina, because it's a new quarter, they have to refile and recertify. Am I correct?
I will check on that and send you an email for you to disseminate.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm sure. And with something that serious, I wouldn't want to guess.
He said some questions had come in through the legal hotline. So If you guys have any questions with your agents that are still filing unemployment, you might want to double check on that. But with the new quarter, there might be some delays on that. So are there any other legal updates that they need to be aware of? I didn't think so on my part. Austin, did you?
No. And obviously, you know, any form changes that are made this year, we're going to make a proactive effort to just put out some videos, give lead time, but, you know, be on the lookout for some of those that may be coming later this year.
All right. Thank you so much. If there's no other questions for Austin, I just have a few things I want to give everybody an update on. They're still working on the construction in our leased office area, as you probably can see with the plastic behind me. They're supposed to be completely done with the lease in the whole building, in the whole facility by the end of the month. So we hope they're on schedule for that. PRAR night out at the brewery, September 24th. You're hearing this here first. So this is for your guys' information. The board of directors, executive board and all of board of directors, with some follow-up and advice from our state level, have decided to make that trivia night virtual. So instead of having it at the brewery because of the COVID increase and everything that's going on, we do not want to put our members at risk, but we don't want you guys to be forgot about. We are still here, so we're gonna do it. We're still gonna have the silent auction. We're still gonna have a fun night. We're just gonna do it virtually, and we're gonna do a trivia night. So more information is gonna come on that. We would still love some donations for the silent auction. And we're just gonna do a fun virtual trivia night and do hour and a half, 2 rounds of trivia. We'll have some prizes with that. So if you're willing to donate for the silent auction portion, all proceeds are going to benefit RPAC. And that will lead me into our RPAC update. We are significantly behind. We're only about 40% of our goal that is set by the National Association for RPAC. And I did send that out in our meeting in June, where we were on our goal, and I will share that information as well with a follow-up email, exactly where we are in our July numbers. But we are only about 23% participation level, and we've gathered $5,400 of our $13,000 goal. So that is set by National. They've worked really hard on getting us unemployment for our realtors and independent contractors on the advocacy level. They've worked really hard on the state level with business license and everything. So we're hoping that everybody could at least give $25 this year, even in light of everything. We're hoping that people will give to get our RPAC goals up. This is the last day today for our survey to be entered into the drawing. We'll be shutting off the survey next Monday. So I'll be sending it out one more time today. If you don't have it, let me know. But please encourage yourself and all of your agents to fill out our survey that we have out there. We're using last year's survey and again this year's survey to help guide. The board uses that information, and I use that information to guide where the association's headed and what services and what programs we're putting together and offering for you guys. So by the end of the day today, we're going to take the names of those who have already completed it. And as of yesterday afternoon, we'd had 71 people that had completed the survey out of 565 people. 4 people will, at random, will be chosen to receive a $25 Visa gift card at the end of the day today. And then I want to share one last thing. So our website has gone live. Have you guys looked at our website yet? Hopefully you have. So our website, new website has gone live, and this is a view of our website. So you see here our broker update. July and August are pretty slow, but you can click here. You can learn about the commitment to excellence, RPAC. I have COVID updates here, and you click here. You have all of your resources for COVID updates. You can find out the mask ordinances here. for the different counties we cover. You can get all of the executive orders and what's in place. If you need those, then it'll take you straight to those links. If you're still needing education, you have your online education information here. If you want a designation or CE classes, these are all CE eligible for South Carolina. Some are South Carolina and North Carolina. You have voter registration, you have advocacy. This one is going to start being updated. You have all of your market reports. So this is all the way through June's market reports that just came out. So you can go here and click your market reports. Or you have access if to get your market reports through SCR and then Canopy. So we have all that information. If there's something that is not on our website that you want to see, please let us know. Please let me know. I worked really hard to try to make it very user-friendly for you. And everything at your fingertips, so that all you have to do is go right here.
Kelly, that was a great deal of work. I don't think people realize all that went into recreating our site so it was both user-friendly and full of information, and something that's available to everybody. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. So I am open to ideas here. So if you guys have any ideas, if there's something that can make your guys' job easier, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here for you guys. Honestly, that's what my job is for. That's what Robin's job's for. If you'll just bear with us, we did transition over with our new association management system that you guys are going to be able to log into. If you go here, member login, you're going to be able to create your own account later on. And what that's going to do is you're going to have access to your own hub if it comes up, to where you're going to be able to get to your directory listings. You'll have access to all these different resources. You're going to have access to the bylaws, our policies and procedures. You're going to see the strat plan, the financial policies. Everything's going to be at your fingertips, your agent's fingertips. If they want to see our transfer form or application forms. This is something new that I just developed that explains when our billing goes out, when it's due, what the late fee is, when you'll be marked or when you'll lose your membership if you don't pay it, that kind of stuff. This is all going to be at your fingertips, all available through our new website. So this is just went live this week. The realtor and affiliate directory is still working on. We're still getting everything updated into the new system. Hopefully within the next 2 weeks, that'll all be taken care of. So that's all the information I had for you. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Kelly, I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So can we go and create an account now for that website, or do we need to wait for a couple weeks when it's complete?
You can go now and create an account for that website. If you have problems, just shoot me an email or Robin an email, and we will look into it. So I have a conference call at 1 o'clock. So there's some people that are not in the system that we're still trying to figure out why they didn't transfer over. So if you're not in the system, it may not let you create an account and we can get it corrected right away.
So does that mean our Rapatoni account is no longer valid?
That is, so that account is still active for a few more weeks, but you can't make payments through it anymore. That's why we did it just now, because we're not going to be billing until October. So yeah, the Rapatoni account will not be active. It's not connected to our national database anymore. It's all through this new system. So it gives us a couple of months before the billing goes active. Yep.
Great, it looks great.
So I think it's going to be a lot more user-friendly. It's got a lot of positive feedback. So, and so we'll push more information out and more trainings out for you. The nice thing is once the directory becomes live, you'll be able to go into that info hub that I'll show you. We'll do more training, and you'll be able to put a link to your own website if you have your own website and all your own information as well.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Just so I'm clear, I have an agent that literally just started or just starting.
Mhm.
So I would direct her to this new site to get the information for joining, correct?
It's still the same website, the same web address. It's going to automatically take her there.
Okay.
So, any other questions?
Just that, Billy, that we're coming up to elections for our board of realtors, and there's been a lot of great changes, a lot of great movement. Things have are much better appreciably, and that's because we have such a good board. We have several of us that are rolling off, and we're going to need to fill those seats. So if you have any interest at all in participating in our board, it only meets once a month, which for an hour, we try to keep it at an hour. Billy's a taskmaster. She makes sure that that's done that way. But it's really been a great group of people, and I'm just so proud to have been affiliated with it over the years. And I'm rolling off this year, so not going to have me anymore. So we're looking for more people. So just notify Billy if this is something you'd like to do, or myself at my colleencousins@gmail.com. Judy Castorina and I are the nomination committee, and we will be more than happy to answer any questions. That's it.
All right. That is everything that I had on my list for today. Do you guys have anything else that you guys needed to cover or any other questions? I hope it was useful. If you have any other topics for our next quarterly broker update, please let me know. Don't forget, renewals will due in September, September 30th. And you guys have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.